We all have a story we can tell of God's faithfulness in our lives. He has shaped us and molded us in big ways and in small ways. I'm excited to bring you some of the stories of God's faithfulness in the lives here of the women at First Reformed Church. Hi, I'm April Beaver. I'm the Director of Digital Media and Women's Ministry here at First Reformed Church. And I have with me today Sarah Kuiper, who does the children.
Yes.
The Director of Children's Ministries.
Yep.
And although Sarah works here at church, she's a person too, and not just an employee.
Yep.
And so this is not so much about what she does here at church, but more about Sarah's heart as a person. And so enjoy our conversation as Sarah and I talk about some things that are near and dear to her heart.
Absolutely.
All right. So Sarah, we are embarking in church on something about special needs. And this is something that you have been pushing for since you were hired. So I'd like to know a little bit more about why special needs, what's important about special needs in your heart.
Sure. Well, can I give you a little bit of backstory on kind of how this passion really started for me?
Please, I would love that.
So the first 5 years of our marriage, Dave and I lived in Illinois. And for that first year, I worked at a church. And I did a split internship. It was right out of college. And half of the time was at Peace Community Church, and half of the time was at Camp Manitoqua. And I really just dove into ministry. I was 10 hours from home. Dave was 3 hours from home. We really didn't know anybody except Tim and Sarah Van Z. She happened to work at the same church that I did, awesome. Which was really crazy. But during that time when we were in Illinois, Dave and I did a lot of nannying for families. And we were we were a package deal, and we were young, and we didn't have any kids. Dave was fun, and I made sure that the kids got fed and were in bed on time. And so it was a really good combination. One of our favorite families that we nannied for was the Seafelt family. And what was significant about the Seafelts was their daughter, Melissa, had cerebral palsy. She was nonverbal, and she was in a wheelchair. We had to learn how to run her speaking device, which was her Dynavox. We had to feed her. We had to bathe her. We had to change her after she had urinated or soiled herself. I mean, we had to do everything for her, and I loved every minute of it.
Wow.
After that year at camp and at church, then go ahead. Sorry.
Did you pardon me? Did you nanny for them a lot?
We did.
Was it?
We did.
Like once a week, a month, or how?
We did once a week, probably every Friday, because she was the youngest. And then she had older sisters who were cheerleaders. And so they would go to the cheerleading or to the football games where her sister Whitney was a cheerleader. And we would take Melissa and we would nanny for her. And then there were a few times where they would be away for like the weekend, probably a long weekend. And then we would stay overnight there.
Okay.
So it was fun. Mm-hmm. After that year at camp and at church, we continued to stay in Illinois, but neither of them had a position for me, a long-term position, which was absolutely fine. And so that is when I started teaching at Elam Christian Services, which is a school for special needs. And the Seafelts actually happened to send Melissa to that school. And so her mom, Deb, was one of my references. And I really just got to know those kids and have such an appreciation for what their families go through, and how even though they have learning differences, like they can still learn. And it's it just, whenever the kids like learned how to add, that we did a whole party, like a whole celebration, because they knew how to add 2 + 2. And it was just awesome. I just loved every minute of it.
Sure. Yeah. So fast forward.
Yeah.
And now you're here.
Now I'm here.
And have you been able to work with special needs since then? I mean, yeah, in the church or an environment?
Yep. So when we moved back to Iowa, because we didn't want to raise our kids in Illinois, I worked for 3-ish years for Hope Haven. And I worked in one of the residential homes. I was the lead, actually, of 4 of their residential homes. And so I wrote all of the IEPs, and I stayed in the houses with them, and I just helped them learn life. What I did learn from that experience is I enjoy working with kids much more than I enjoy working with adults.
Okay.
The residents that I had at Hope Haven, they all happened to be adults. That was the home that was available at the time.
Yeah.
And it was fun, and I enjoyed it, but I think it would have been a different experience if it was kids.
Sure. And then, so what is your favorite part of working with special needs, the challenge of that they can still learn and seeing that actually happen? What is kind of your favorites on that?
I would say, that's very much my favorite. I love that aha moment. Like, oh, I get it. I actually get it. Yeah. And it's so cool. And like especially when we're talking about like faith and spirituality stuff, just to watch kids and their childlike faith, and they love Jesus because they love Jesus. And I just love watching that as well.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges that are more difficult to deal with?
Well, in a church setting in specific, adaptability. In a church setting, a lot of times we expect that all kids are just going to learn the same way. And the schools have done a really good job of adapting to families and to kids with learning differences. But the church hasn't caught up to that quite yet. And so we throw kids in a classroom and the teachers don't have any training, and they're volunteers. Like they don't have a lot of them don't have any educational background.
Sure.
And they're not quite sure how to handle things. And we haven't done a great job of training them in the past.
Right.
And we just expect that they'll just move along with the class because that's what they're supposed to do, even if they're not really getting anything out of it because we're not teaching them in a way that they learn.
Right. And so what percentage of kids do you think have some sort of special needs or some sort of need here in our church?
I guess that's how you look at it.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Because Dave and I talk about this all the time. Kids learn so much differently now than we did as kids. Mm-hmm. As kids, you put your paper in front of you and you did your paper. And especially at church, you sat in all of the wooden desks that had the thing that came, like the little desk part that came around.
Very uncomfortable clothes.
Your very uncomfortable clothes, all in your pristine dresses with the toile underneath and so on. And that's just the way it was done.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the way that it's done now, which I think is good.
Yeah.
But I would say right now we're probably not at a real high percent, but that doesn't mean that kids and families won't come in, even if they don't join our church, if they would want to be part of our ministry, because there's a place.
Well, and even one child,
absolutely,
it's worth.
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, and so what are some of the biggest needs that you can see with these kids that learn in different ways?
One of the needs is some individualized attention. Yeah. One thing and I'm going to go to. I'm putting on my ministry hat now for just a minute. Yeah. One of the changes that we're going to be making in our kids ministries is we're going to increase our class size just a little bit. And I know that sounds a little bit scary, but we're also adding like an aide to every classroom. So we are going to need a few more teachers.
Sure.
And aides. And those aides are really just there just in case anybody needs something. And they are a support for the teacher. We're going to be partnering with Northwestern a little bit, or some,
Good.
And we're going to have some college kids who really have a heart and a passion for kids with special needs. And we're not, just to clarify though, we are not putting an aid in just certain classrooms. We're putting an aid in all classrooms because all teachers could use support.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and you know that as a teacher.
I do.
So, yes.
Yeah, it's always good. What kind of things do you look for a kid that needs something extra? What are some clues? Let's say there's a mom at home that her kid's growing up and she's concerned that maybe she has a kid that's on that spectrum.
Sure.
What kind of things do you look for?
One thing, and I can speak from a little bit of experience with this because we have a child who, they're not significant, but has some needs.
Yeah.
And the biggest clue for us was she was missing mile markers. She wasn't, or milestones, I guess, not mile markers, right? Yeah. We're not driving. So she was missing those big milestones. Like she wasn't talking when she wasn't keeping up. And some of that is just personality. Like we have to push her for everything. She was my kid who didn't toilet train till she was 3.5 just because she didn't care. Yeah. And I finally looked at her and I said, kid, you will not get one more chocolate chip cookie or one more drop of chocolate milk until you use the restroom. And she looked at me, she's like, all right. And it was done. Like she was totally done. So some of it is just personality too. But yeah, she didn't walk on time. She didn't talk on time. She was always just about a half a step behind. Mm-hmm. So that was my first clue. Some are more obvious. You can see some more physical markers, but that would be the first one to look for.
The first thing to look for. And then when something like that happens, what are some of the steps that we would take as a parent?
So we really utilized Area 4.
Okay.
So we contacted Area 4 and they came in and they did a lot of speech therapy and they noticed some other things. And so then they were able to refer us to occupational therapy. My child went through speech therapy from 18 months old until 5th grade, I want to say.
Sure.
Just because she was behind.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it was, and she wasn't forming her words correctly and that kind of thing. So Area 4 is such a fantastic resource. In our church, we have wonderful people who teach special ed. And so they are experts in their field, and they can kind of walk beside you and answer any questions, and they can kind of help you look for things as well. If you have a question, I'm sure they would be more than willing to answer what you're asking. Yeah.
So these kids are never, they don't do life alone, just like kids with adults. So kids with kids, sometimes that's an entirely different conversation when you've got someone that can't keep up or has different character traits or personalities. So what have you seen in the past that works really well for teaching our kids how to accept and include those that might have special needs?
Well, one thing is the schools are doing such a great job with inclusion. And I'm going to use a phrase that my kids hate. Back when I was a kid, but when I was a child, River Valley was open in Rock Valley. And so kids with special needs went to River Valley. And that was the way it was. And you didn't see kids with special needs
it was kind of
in the school system.
Us and them.
It was an us and them. And I think kids now, and I think it's a wonderful change, but I think kids now are just more willing or they're around it more. So they're exposed to it more. So they sometimes can teach us as adults the best way to treat people and how to navigate that. We have had a couple of kids that have had some special needs in our ministry, and we talked with the other kids and we said, their brain works differently and things might have to look a little bit different. And the kids are like, all right,
Okay.
sounds good, because this is something that they're used to.
Yeah.
And I've seen wonderful examples of kids just helping other kids out because that child is struggling, and they just kind of take that child under their wing and come on, let's go do this. And it's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, well, good. So, Sarah, you've talked about how your heart for these kids, but I want to know a little bit more about how working with kids, special needs kids, has changed you. Where have you found that God, of course, gave you this desire to work with kids, and He must have done it because of an impact that He wanted to make in your life and in your heart. So.
Well, one thing that I've noticed about myself that it's really working with special needs kids has really helped is it's made me softer. You know, I was pretty rigid.
Okay.
As a teenager and even in college, I was pretty sure I knew everything and I was always right. And I knew how it was supposed to go because this is the way it's supposed to go. And it really, there's not one way of doing things. And I really feel like working with special needs kids, God has kind of sanded down some of those rough, rigid edges of me.
Sure.
I also have become much more tenderhearted towards people who not just are hurting, but people who are different. You know, people who may not fit in everywhere, you know, and not even necessarily kids with special needs, but like some of those what I would call fringe kids, the kids who don't have a place regardless of how they learn.
Right.
I feel like God has really softened me to that and has given me a really tender heart towards that and making sure that everyone is included. Another way God has changed me is when you parent a child that has some learning differences, you just, it's just different. And I don't even know how, I'm not explaining it well. It's just different. You have to rethink everything.
Sure.
And what worked for maybe 2 or 3 of your kids isn't gonna work like at all for this child. And so, it's really opened my eyes to see the bigger picture. And it's opened my eyes to see the world differently because I see how people, not all people, but how some people have reacted to my child. And I've seen the other side of that. I've seen her reaction to how people have treated her.
Sure.
And I don't ever want to do that to a child, and children don't deserve that.
No.
You know, when it's my child coming home saying, this person said I'm dumb, but I'm not dumb. I'm not dumb. You know, and having to say it over and over, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional.
No.
Having to say it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So she believes it herself.
Yeah.
You know, that's just, it's heart-wrenching.
It is heart-wrenching.
It's heart-wrenching, and it's not the way it was intended to be.
No. But these special kids are placed in our lives because God wants us to see people the way that He sees people. Yeah. You know? Yep. And we are all so different. Now, some of us more maybe different than others, but we're all His special person. And He loves us all exactly as He chose to make us.
Exactly.
And those kids, they need a place.
They do.
They need a place where they just feel like I am loved for who I am.
Exactly.
Exactly as I am. Exactly how I learn.
Yep.
And they don't have to be on guard.
No.
Maybe that's one of the biggest things that we want kids to be able to feel here is that they don't have to be on guard.
They don't.
They can,
and they don't have to be on guard. And there's a spot.
yeah,
There's a spot.
where they can,
And we can accommodate, and we are more than willing to accommodate.
so that I think you told me yesterday, so that every kid can feel like they can learn about Jesus.
Absolutely.
Every kid.
Every kid, every child in this church needs to be able to learn about Jesus in a way that they can learn.
That they can learn.
That
and
they can learn.
They can understand, and they
Exactly.
can take that as their own personal belief. And
Yep. You know, I don't care if every child knows what the Septuagint is or, what the cycle of apostasy is, as long as they know that Jesus loves them and Jesus died for them.
Right.
And that they can change the world around them because of his love and his grace
Sure.
and his mercy. That's what I need.
Right.
That's what I want.
Right. Well, that is so exciting.
Yeah.
I'm so excited that you have this opportunity to share your heart with the people here. We need someone like you that has a heart for specific kids that we can reach out to and share with them the love of Christ.
Yep.
So,
Well, thank you for asking me. I really appreciate it.
all right. And that's all we have for Sarah today. I'm sure that maybe I can talk her into coming back with a different topic at some time.
Okay.
We'll see.
I think you probably could talk me into it.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for having me.